Warning: this video is intended for a mature audience only. It contains graphic content and graphic language. The contents of this video may be a trigger to some individuals, as it is extremely emotionally charged and unapologetic. Others may find the contents of this video to be offensive. It should be noted that this is not a smear campaign towards those with the possibility of becoming offended by the adult language and/or content of this video. Its production is for educational purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. I believe and demand that journalist Anthony Mestiz of the Pueblo Chieftain, along with the Pueblo Chieftain and the Pueblo Police Department for their involvement, make a televised public apology for willfully publishing misleading information to the public in the February 21st, 2020 article of the Pueblo Chieftain written by Mr. Mestiz, especially for the highly offensive and misleading statement made by Anthony Mestiz where he falsely claims, and I quote, "In other words, Stephenson went back to Turner's house," end quote. Not only was this statement made by Mr. Mestiz without providing any form of factual supporting evidence specific to this individual case, but his statement furthermore shines a light on the true egotistical and unprofessionally unethical motivation behind the article's publication. It is clear from the article's title and opening sentence that the article was an attempt at damage control for the Pueblo Police Department against backlash from the public about their mishandling of the ongoing issue between Stephenson and Turner. The title and opening sentence read, "Many factors contributed to Pueblo woman's death." The opening sentence is, "Although it might seem that the system failed a Pueblo woman who died Wednesday after a severe beating allegedly by her ex-boyfriend in January, local law enforcement authorities say it's much more complicated than that." Both of these are implying that these, quote, "many contributing factors" involved in this specific murder are going to be revealed upon reading the article, and that these are the reasons to not be upset with them over this case. Now, I've read this article numerous times, and I have found there to be two contributing factors, only two. And last I checked, many has never meant two of anything, especially when these two factors were already well known. However, for the sake of argument, and to provide supporting evidence for my bold claims, as well as for those who have not read the article, those who have read it but possibly didn't catch on to its absurdity, and for those outside of Pueblo, Colorado, let's go over the article. In fact, let's thoroughly go over it, breaking it into two parts and examining each part to see exactly what they claim the many contributing factors to be. And now I'm starting at the second sentence, since I've already read you the first. Nicole Stephenson, 33 of Pueblo, died at Swedish Medical Center in Denver at 5:37 p.m. on Wednesday. Her ex-boyfriend, Nathan Turner, 37, who was arrested in Pueblo on January 27th on suspicion of attempted second-degree murder and first-degree assault in connection with the beating, now faces a second-degree murder charge in connection with her death. Judge Greg Studahar, I don't know how to pronounce that, but I'm assuming it's Swedish. Judge Greg Studahar set bond for Turner at $2 million. And even if Turner makes the bail, the judge also ordered intensive supervision and GPS monitoring. Now, side note, just remember that sentence I just read you, okay? It's very important. Continuing on. Following the January arrest, Turner, who had been arrested several times because of altercations between him and Stephenson in the past, was released on a $200,000 bond. He was out on bond when Stephenson died. After the January arrest, Pueblo District Attorney Jeff Chosner said his office requested a $150,000 cash-only bond, an amount that he said was very high when Turner was arrested in connection with the beating. We take a look at the case, then we review it and we make a recommendation to the court as to what we think the bond should be. Then it's up to the court to accept our recommendation or not, Chosner said. But it was a cash bond, and his family basically came up with the money. When we are talking close to $250,000, that's a pretty hefty bond, and he and the family were able to make it. Chosner said the court doesn't look at family resources. It looks at the defendant's resources. You would think $200,000 for an individual was high, but it would appear that the family helped him make bond. There are guidelines that dictate bond amounts. Turner's bonds escalated each time he was arrested, according to court documents. In each case, bond elevated from a bondsman being able to handle the matter to cash-only bonds. Here's the report numbers for previous cases against Turner involving Stephenson, and one can see how the bonds rose each time. 18 CR 2588. A bond of $30,000 was set and a bondsman posted to get him out. 19 CR 2308. A bond of $50,000 cash was set. His father posted a cashier's check to get him out. Again, I repeat, his father posted a cashier's check to get him out. The third one they list, 19 CR 2319. A bond of $150,000 cash only was set, and again, his father posted a cashier's check to get him out. The other major complication in figuring our appropriate bonds involves judges here in using the Rocky Mountain Offender Management System's recommendations for bond, a system used since 2016. The assessment tool is designed to use factors such as the severity of the charge, criminal history, behavioral history, and family ties to the community to form a report that judges can use to guide them in deciding what kind of bail amounts to set for defendants. Ultimately, a judge still is responsible for setting bail. Remember that as well, people. All right, reading on. The program, which applies an evidence-based approach called the Colorado Pretrial Assessment Tool, to evaluate which inmates are best suited for release to be monitored while awaiting trial, and which pose a higher risk to the community and should be kept in jail on higher bail amounts, marked a new approach for the county in dealing with inmates booked into jail on suspicion of criminal charges. Based on the fact that at the time of this offense, the defendant was already on intensive pretrial supervision and a GPS monitor, plus $200,000 worth of cash bonds posted by his father via cashier's check, I requested a very high bond, said Emily Vandenberg, lead prosecutor in the case that now is a second-degree murder case. She continues, my request was a bond of at least $1 million cash only, with intensive pretrial supervision and GPS. Judge Greg Studehauer set bond at $2 million with intensive supervision and GPS monitoring, Vandenberg said. Chostner said the process is the same for every individual. We take a look at each person individually to see what the circumstances are of the offense and what this person's past history has been, Chostner said. We follow what the law dictates, and we hope that the judges will follow the rules as we do. Remember that shit too. Anyway. In this case, it would appear that he and or family was able to post bond. That was not our preference, but that is how the rules are with regard to pretrial confinement. All 4 of Pueblo's homicides this year have been related to domestic violence, and the Pueblo Police Department wants people in harm's way to be aware of all the resources available. Unfortunately, domestic violence is something we handle far too often, said Police Sergeant Franklin Ortega. We deal with them daily. We also encourage people to use resources if they are victims. Ortega said in domestic violence cases, police officers and detectives take extra steps to assist the prosecution. It's a separate form. It's another police report that includes everything the victim tells us. It lists their injuries and where they are injured, Ortega said. The whole concept behind that is to make better cases to try to help these victims. Sometimes they won't admit they are victims, a dynamic behind it. It's not as simple as people may think. Ortega said in the case involving Stephenson, the victim reported domestic violence the day before she was found, beaten, and taken into emergency surgery. We arrested the suspect several times. He was able to bond out, Ortega said. We did everything we could. We took him to jail several times. Ortega said he emphasizes the resources available for people suffering domestic violence when explaining such cases to the media. We need people to know that there is help out there, Ortega said. Ortega said he has dealt with domestic violence on the job since his rookie police year more than 20 years ago. This is a serious problem. We just need people to know that there are resources. Ortega said domestic violence cases are more complex and that officers follow very specific procedures, but there often is a particular complication. In some instances, the victims do not want to cooperate, he said. A police affidavit said that Stephenson was found beaten at Turner's home at 2240 Norwich Avenue, despite him being under a restraining order. Here's the quote that I am very offended by, made by Mr. Anthony Mestez. And I quote, "In other words, despite previous incidents, she returned to Turner's home." Nathan Turner is listed as the restrained party in a restraining order in which Nicole Stephenson was the protected person. The documented police reports indicate Nicole and Nathan were in an intimate relationship. It should be known Nathan Turner showed an address of 2240 Norwich Avenue, the affidavit said. That's where I'm going to start part one. Let's go over that and see exactly what they gave us as many contributing factors. Let's see. Because we just read a lot, right? Like, that was a lot of shit we just read. So there should be like a lot of factors that they told us, right? So how many factors did we get specifically contributing to her death? I'd say one, right? Nathan Turner himself. That's it. Everything else is a bunch of bullshit to hypnotize you into accepting and believing that all that shit we just read about how bonds work and who's in charge of what and who requested the higher bond price, that all that fluff somehow constitutes as part of these contributing factors. Do not accept this. You don't have to. It is willful bullying with misleading information. None of that has anything to do with directly contributing to her death. None of it. We're going to come back to the first part in a second, but to continue on to the second part, they then continue the article with expert insight from Maureen White of the YWCA, who simply regurgitates an extremely generalized textbook version of the common accepted opinion behind the psychological dynamics of domestic violence, saying nothing actually pertaining to the individual case in question. Now this, too, is merely more babble to give the illusion of an expert opinion, further perpetuating the misleading appearance of many contributing factors. White actually doesn't even address the Stephenson case at all. And I'm sorry, but simply reciting different accepted concepts of how and why domestic violence happened, or playing the blame game over who's responsible for the amounts that the bond is set at, is not an acceptable answer to the questions and concerns that everyone has over one individual case. I'm not going to read word for word everything that Ms. White states, but I am going to read some of the things that are going to help with my case of these bold claims that I'm making, that this was an attempt at damage control, where they are willfully giving misleading and false information to the public, I believe, to persuade the public in their opinion about this whole case. Maureen White said it is common for the victims of domestic violence to return to the person abusing them. It's a trend for sure. There's a cycle of abuse when it comes to domestic violence. It is never usually a one-and-done type of situation, White said. If we knew why they would return, I don't think we would be in existence anymore because we would be able to address it right away. She said there are a lot of reasons why victims return, including being isolated from family and friends, and the fact that their abuser has kept them from working, thereby eliminating their access to finances. They don't feel like they are able to leave the situation because they feel they have no resources. There also are times they go back because the abuser swears they are never going to do it again. That's part of the cycle, White said. White said there's also an element of shame. If my family doesn't realize what is going on, I might be embarrassed to tell them what is going on, White said of victims' reasoning. In a lot of cases, we don't know until the first event happens, in the sense that this time maybe he left this time physical bruises. They could also go back because they have children, and the abuser has threatened to keep their children from them. Unfortunately, in these cases, in Pueblo this week, it resulted in death. White said it's also a trend that many victims don't want to cooperate with police when a report is filed. Now I'm going to stop there because the rest is just some bullshit where they tell you about the other cases of domestic violence that have resulted in death this year. And they end it with, here's some resources, blah, blah, blah. Call us. Don't call police. Call YWCA. Okay, now let's go over all of it all together. As you can see, I have stuff highlighted. That's the stuff we're going to go over because this is where this in the highlights is the information that gives away the intent behind this article. And it also shows where they fucked up and where they went wrong and how they could have helped and saved her the day before the beating. Okay? Simply because they didn't follow what they were supposed to do. Despite saying in this article that they did. Now, the first thing I have highlighted, circled, is Judge Greg Studahar set bond for Turner for $2 million. And even if Turner makes the bail, the judge also ordered intensive supervision and GPS monitoring. Now, is that supposed to make us feel safe? Or make us supposed to feel like you guys did something? Wasn't he already on intensive supervision and GPS monitoring? Obviously not as intense as you guys claim. Because nobody saw him go around her the day before, right? And okay, last I knew, if somebody had a restraining order against somebody else and they violated that restraining order, they would be arrested. Why was he not arrested the day before the beating took place? That is where you fucked up. That is what you did wrong. That is where you failed her. Because yes, you did. You completely failed her. I mean, it says it here. He says you have been arrested, who had been arrested several times because of altercations in the past. Okay, well, you guys claim that you take a look at the past severity of the charges, his past criminal history, behavioral charges. So y'all didn't see before anything that he did with her, the knife, any of that. Let me go back to these report numbers that they give us for the bond amounts, okay? Yes, they give us the bond amounts and how he was gotten out, but they don't tell us what for. In November, he was arrested for felony kidnapping charges. He kidnapped her and held her with a knife, with a machete, I don't know, but it says something about a lethal blade, okay? He kidnapped her. This is information that is pertinent to the statement that I demand Anthony Mestiz apologize for, a televised apology, because he states, in other words, Stephenson returned to Turner's house. If he has been arrested for kidnapping in the past, what the fuck makes you think that she went over there willingly that day? Did it just skip your mind that, maybe this already kidnapper kidnapped her again? You ever think that? I mean, what? I thought that it would be standard policing to know that he had been arrested for that in the past. And if not, then that is also giving credence to the extreme lack of communication that I personally have witnessed in the Pueblo Police Department and judicial system. I mean, it's ridiculous. You guys give yourselves away about your lack of communication and the failure to do what you guys are supposed to do. Why wasn't he arrested when she reported domestic violence the day before? And if he reported it the day before, if she reported it the day before, that could also be motivation behind him getting pissed off and committing the crime the very next day. As far as the $200,000 worth of cash bonds that was given to him that his father posted the cashier's check to get him out on, if y'all look at the severity of the charge, his criminal history and behavioral history, and she is sitting in emergency surgery intensive care in Denver, that should be grounds alone to not let him out. He's clearly an extremely violent person. I have to stop for a second. My apologies. Give me a minute. Okay. So what did the second part give us as many contributing factors specific to this individual case? 0. There's absolutely 0 in the second part. Nothing that Maureen White says has anything to do with the specific case in question, okay? Now I'm going to read you guys the quotes that are the main things that they are trying to hypnotize you with into believing that this was the situation behind the Turner and Stephenson case, okay? Miss White states things like, it's a trend for sure. She also said, victims don't want to cooperate with the police reports. That is making you think, falsely misleading you to think that that was the case with Nicole, that Nicole didn't want to cooperate with the police and that she willingly went back to Turner's house that day. I'm pretty sure that reporting the domestic violence the day before the crime took place is cooperating with the police. They didn't cooperate by going and arresting him that fucking day. That's it. I mean, y'all better have one of the most amazing excuses I have ever fucking heard for him not being arrested that day, because that is where you are responsible, and that is where y'all drop the fucking ball. Right there. Okay? Now, the statement that I am disgusted by is obviously the one made by Anthony Mestiz. But know that I am not completely blaming him solely for this absurd and offensive article, because it is quite clear that it is heavily influenced by the Pueblo Police Department. Because people are not fucking stupid, okay? We know how shit goes down, especially if we ourselves have been arrested before. And we know that you did fail her. And to come out the very next day and say all this bullshit shit where you claim you're going to give us the contributing factors to her death specifically, and you give us nothing, absolutely nothing. In fact, you end it and have the audacity to inadvertently, misleadingly, falsely blame her for what happened by the statement that Mr. Mesta says is fucking disgusting. And I'm going to try my best to somehow have somebody audit this entire investigation to make sure that he's not allowed back out into the public because daddy posts a fucking check. I'm also near completion of writing Mrs. Vandenberg my prosecution witness letter, where I attest to the behavior and type of person that Nathan was. For those of you listening and watching who aren't from Pueblo, I know I'm in California now, but Pueblo is my hometown. And during my freshman year and a couple years after that, I was really good friends with Nicole and Gabby. And I have some extremely, very cherished memories that contain both of them. So it's a personal matter for me. But I'm trying my hardest to take my emotional bias away from this video, because I want this video to focus on how disgusting this article is and how everyone involved deserves an apology, a televised public apology, because it is disgusting that your department would stoop as low as to make excuses and defend your department by blaming the victim and misleading the public into thinking that these situations is how Nicole Stephenson's specific case went down. I want everyone to share this on social media and wherever they can, because Pueblo is a small town, and the newspaper, the Pueblo Chieftain, is even smaller. And I believe that this article was written and these false, misleading statements were made because they felt that they could get away with it, because no one gives a fuck about Pueblo, let alone to read it. Even the people in Pueblo don't give a fuck to read the Pueblo Chieftain. I'm currently located in Los Angeles, California, and I'm doing everything I can right now to try to bring national attention to this case, to the lack of involvement by the Pueblo Police Department and their mishandling of the case, and the absurdity of this article. The main basis of this is this disgusting article that is nothing more than an attempt at damage control. If you made it through this, I want to thank you, because this issue is very, very important to me right now, because I feel so helpless being so far away from Pueblo and everyone in Pueblo and everyone affected by this. And in fact, shit like this is kind of sort of the only thing I feel I can do, because it is an extreme injustice to her and her children and everyone who loved her. And just because Daddy Turner, Mr. Calvin Turner, has money does not mean that the monster known as Nathan Turner should be free to roam around and prey on other women. We need to fight to keep this beast in the cage where he belongs. Thanks for watching. In the description of the video, I'm going to leave a link to the article that I am discussing, and I'm probably going to leave links to the other two articles, because one from KRDO does explain the kidnapping that took place in November. And I just want everyone to read it for themselves. Read all three of them. Take what I have told you and read them thoroughly and make up your own mind, because I'm pretty positive that it's going to be quite clear what the intent was behind this article.